This is the programme the Scientologists didn't want you to see. They've done all they can to stop it.
Why? Because the big story has secretly filmed inside the cult to reveal its bizarre mind control techniques. This man is talking to an ashtray. And this man is supposed to be teaching communication skills. Tonight, as worldwide concern mounts over cults, we go inside one of the biggest in Britain. Prompted by recent cases involving Scientologists, we began to investigate what goes on inside these seemingly harmless little shops that are in high streets all over Britain. The results of our inquiry are disturbing. They're reinforced this week by a new report from independent American cult experts who've also come up with new evidence about Scientology.
Of all the cult groups we've studied for the last 2 decades now, Scientology has shown itself consistently to be the most effective in terms of its recruiting, and more importantly, potentially the most damaging in terms of its effects on its members.
So is Scientology a harmless fringe religion, or is it a sinister sect that controls the minds of its members? To find out, the big story has sent an undercover reporter inside the organisation.
But first, a military intelligence consultant and some former Scientologists drilled big story reporter Ali Davis in how to pass Scientology's security checks.
And then you explain it in your own words, okay? Are you a journalist? What does this question mean to you?
It means, do I work in journalism?
Just a little bit of movement still on that when I asked you that question. Just not much, but just a little bit. Let's just ask it you again so you feel a bit more comfortable. I'll check this question with you. Are you a journalist?
No.
Ali is learning to handle the E-meter, a primitive lie detector.
That question again. Are you a journalist?
No.
Good.
She'll frequently encounter security checks like this once inside Scientology. Ali sets off for Poole in Dorset, home of one of Scientology's most successful missions. Some of Ali's experiences were captured by her secret camera. Others we have reconstructed from the notes she made immediately afterwards. On Poole High Street, she's approached within minutes by a young man with a clipboard.
If you could be anything in life, what would you most like to be?
Explorer.
Claiming to promote a book, the young man persuades Ali to go with him to his office to complete a survey. It's 40 minutes before he admits he works for the Scientologists. This is how most people are recruited into Scientology, but they don't know the true beginnings of this so-called science of the mind. Scientology was created by this man, Lafayette Ron Hubbard, or plain Ron to his followers. From within Hubbard's inner circle, his PR man, Vaughan Young, worked on Ron's chief ambition for 20 years.
Hubbard literally had a plan for world conquest. He actually literally wanted to take over the world. But he had to put it into other terms, and the term he came up with was to clear the planet. And this sounds like a very beneficent action. We're going to clear the planet, which means rid it of its problems. But really, it was more of a case like a Hitler, that he wants to rid the planet of vermin. And the vermin are the people that are stopping him. And these were basically the enemies of Scientology.
Scientologists dismiss as propaganda all criticism of Ron Hubbard, the church, or their beliefs from former members, or apostates as they call them. But there are plenty of independent sources too.
Science fiction writer Hubbard created a colourful life history for himself, claiming to be a nuclear physicist, explorer and war hero. This was exposed as the myth it was by Sunday Times journalist Russell Miller.
Ron Hubbard was a charlatan, a liar, a confidence trickster, a thief. He invented his whole life. He invented a career to substantiate himself as a guru for the Church of Scientology.
In 1968, Hubbard was banned from Britain and took to the high seas. mostly young followers became the elite core of Scientology, the C organization.
Do you ever think that you might be quite mad?
Oh, yes. The one man in the world who never believes he's mad is a madman.
Hubbard's organization fought back against bans and adverse publicity worldwide to become a multi-million-dollar empire controlling a myriad of interlocking companies. Hubbard left $650 million when he died in 1986. Scientology then passed to a new master, David Miscavige. For 5 months, Miscavige's private office was managed by Vaughan Young's wife, Stacy.
His viciousness and his cruelty to staff was unlike anything I had ever experienced in my life. He wanted me to carry out a lot of his vindictive orders. He just loved to degrade the staff. He got a kick out of it. He thought it was funny. Anybody who didn't think it was funny, like I didn't, was very suspect.
Back in Poole, Ali agreed to complete a personality test at home for the Scientologists. This is their standard recruiting technique. She planned to drop it off at the centre and return the next day for her results, so she wasn't wearing her secret camera gear. But the Scientologists were determined she should wait. After more than an hour's wait, she was eventually ushered in to see Debbie, the registrar.
When I was in Debbie's office the first night, I spoke about a relationship breakup, and she really dug into that. She made me actually feel really bad about that, although I actually I'm completely over it. She then went through the personality test. She showed me all these things that were wrong with me, that I had bad communication skills, that I had negative attitude, things that really I don't have in real life, that she made out that I had.
This grinding down of Ali's confidence went on for an hour, until Ali paid £40 for help that Debbie said she needed. Before Ali went undercover, Dr. Brian Tully, a leading consultant clinical and forensic psychologist, had already given her a properly validated personality test.
Ready to go. I'd like you to start the test now, and I'll come back in about 35 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Tully's findings were rather different to those of the Scientologists.
As far as one can understand this form, they're more or less saying that she has some desirable qualities, but she has a whole range of undesirable and poor communication skills. Now, that's just not true. On a scientifically validated test, we find that actually she's a very warm person. She likes to get involved with people at a very early stage. She's emotionally stable. She's open to new experience and interests.
Hello, Tully.
Ali embarks on a communications course costing £50, designed to remedy her supposed lack of communication and relationship skills. These are a series of bizarre exercises. Her partner recites a series of numbers. When he moves on to letters, she must persuade him to go back to numbers.
Oh, can you go back to the numbers again? I was just getting interested in those. And then the numbers were really interesting. Thanks, yeah.
In another corner of the room, a man is learning how to control an ashtray by telling it to stand up and sit down. Now Ali's partner pretends to be a child who has wet his pants. Ali must respond appropriately.
You don't have to be ashamed about that. Lots of kids do that when they first come to school. Yeah, 34. What did I say? Just say the number.
There are also several kids doing communication courses, presumably the children of staff and other members.
7... Actually, 7 should be...
We've reconstructed another training routine from the notes Ali made immediately afterwards. She had to stare fixedly into someone's eyes for over an hour. She even found herself hallucinating.
The staring routines were supposed to make you feel comfortable being with other people, just looking at them. The more you looked at someone, sometimes they changed shape, they grew scales, became like a lizard, or changed from negatives to positives. It was a really strange experience.
Fencing contractor Gary Fry gave the Scientologists £21,000 under the influence of these staring routines.
I actually stared into somebody's eyes for an hour and a half, just continually. And straight afterwards I was taken upstairs to buy more courses, and I can remember just handing over, well, actually signed a piece of blank paper with my initials, and then gave them, they typed a letter of authority in around it, and I gave them my Building Society book, and they just went and drew out what they wanted.
When I count from 1 to 7, your eyes will close. You will remain aware of everything which goes on. You will be able to remember everything that happens here. You can pull yourself out of anything which you get into if you don't like it. Do you understand?
Yes.
Good. 1, 2,
Another technique
3,
is what the Scientologists call auditing.
6, 7. Locate an incident that you feel you can comfortably face. Go to the beginning of that incident.
I'm in my boyfriend's flat, and we're having a huge argument. I've seen him on the street with another girl, and I've asked him about it, and he hasn't denied it. And I've threatened to leave, and he just says, "Okay, go." So I grab my things and walk out the door.
Good. Go back to the beginning.
Ali is required to go over and over a traumatic event in her past.
To a feeling at the time.
I threatened to leave. I just said, I'm going to go then. And he said, "Fine, go. I don't really care if I never see you again." So I just walked out.
Good. Go back to the beginning and go over it again. Pay close attention.
At the end of the session, Ali felt euphoric.
I got quite upset at points that quite emotional, and I even cried during it. And so after the session I felt on a real high. I felt like I'd been released from something.
In Scientology, as in many of the cults, when they are shutting down the mind systematically, when they're shutting down emotions systematically, people will experience a kind of ecstasy by default, as we call it. There'll be a release of some kind of a pressure, and they'll feel this as a psychological high.
Yes.
Frequently, whilst on a high, Ali is taken to see the director of the Poole mission, Roger Kay. He's always keen to sell her more courses. She's already spent £250 and claims to have little money left.
Right.
Kay's recommending Ali should be audited for another 20 hours and do more courses, costing another £2,000. These sessions are often late at night.
You feel more confident about the future and what you want to do and that kind of thing.
So, and that improves your memory?
Yes, that's one of the things it does. There's other things too, but that's...
And even after the centre closes, the hard sell continues. At the end of this lengthy session, so long that the batteries in her camera had run out, Ali makes a revelation.
I threw in a line that I had a disinheritance in Australia, and he became very interested in that. He didn't push me, but he slowly tried to find out ways how I could get that money, how I could fax the bank, how I could get it quickly. Even though I assured him I could get it in a couple of weeks, that wasn't soon enough for him.
Another day, another registrar, another form, and another tactic. Ali needs to move her car as her 2-hour parking ticket is about to expire.
I've got to get a new ticket for my car in the car park. Where is it?
The Scientologist insists on accompanying her. Ali's rarely left alone, even to go to the toilet, and she's escorted from office to office. It's a deliberate ploy, according to former staff member Stuart Boot.
The idea was that you weren't going to let them leave, because often you found if people had a moment or two to think, the chances are they'd leave or want to change their mind about the money they'd paid in for a course, which was often quite high.
Stuart Boot was 5th in command at Poole Mission until November last year. He attended many late-night meetings to decide which clients to hit financially.
It would become a money-orientated thing that you were looked at as to how many services that we could get out of you and how much money we could milk you for.
Nuclear physicist Adam Bird was milked for £34,000. He went to the Scientologists for help with dyslexia, but ended up borrowing from various different banks to buy courses. Then several Scientologists came to lodge with him to help with the hefty interest payments.
During this event, they took over my life. I had not intended to put lodges in my house. I now had lodges in my house with Scientologists, one of whom was quite high up in their command structure. To help pay again, another one of them had loaned my car and was supposedly paying me rent for it. I then didn't have any means of transport.
In America, Flo Conway and Jim Siegelman have been studying cults for the past 20 years. Their new research, which is about to be published, finds that Scientology has the worst long-term effects.
Among Scientologists in particular, people who come out of this group report to us very high levels of amnesia, memory loss, of insomnia, of disorientation, of hallucinations and delusions, of perceptions of bewildering psychic experiences that will plague them. In some instances, we've cataloged for up to 12 years after they leave the group.
Leaving Scientology was a traumatic experience for Gary Fry. Now married with a child, 2 years ago it was his mother's distress that broke through the Scientologist's control over his life.
The last straw was when my mum broke down into tears in front of me and basically startled with her emotions, startled me back into reality and what I was really doing in Scientology, what I was following.
Successful legal action secured the return of the £21,000 he'd paid them, but it was much harder to recover his mental health, though he says becoming a Christian helped.
It took me 2 months of real trauma in trying to leave it, and I went through times of suicidal depression, to times when I was just so depressed. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand what had happened to me. I couldn't understand what Scientology was all about.
While she was at Poole Mission, Ali kept hearing about this place, Saint Hill. This is where Scientology is controlled from in the UK. It's also the home of the Sea Organisation, the dedicated elite core of the Church of Scientology. Ali's next task is to get inside what's regarded as the Holy of Holies amongst devotees of Scientology.
Saint Hill Manor is just outside East Grinstead in Sussex. Ron Hubbard lived here until 1966. Ali is taken to the castle built in the grounds. This is where Scientology courses are taught, right up to the highest levels.
Okay. I went to Saint Hill just to look at the home of L. Ron Hubbard, and within an hour I was taken into the recruiter's office and I was asked if I wanted to join the Sea Organisation.
Here it's just like very dedicated, and that's what you do, right? Like you get birds and fed and, you know...
Right.
It certainly is dedicated. The recruiting officer fails to mention that Ali will be required to sign this billion-year contract if she joins. But she does explain that clearing the planet is a very big task.
Our purpose is really big because obviously to clear Earth, you know, and it takes a long, long time, right?
Mm.
I mean, we're talking about 5 billion people on this planet.
Yeah.
Former Scientologist John Atack has collected an enormous archive on the bizarre system of beliefs that Ron Hubbard invented. Clearing the planet means taking everyone up to the secret OT or operating Thetan levels. It can cost Scientologists around £20,000 to discover these inner mysteries.
Once you've paid an enormous amount of money and signed a covenant of secrecy, and you get onto the third OT level, you're told that a galactic prince called Xenu, some 75 million years ago, rounded up the populations of 76 planets, averaging 178 billion per planet, and brought them to Earth and clustered them together using hydrogen bombs, having dumped them in volcanoes.
The spirits of these exiles, or Thetans as Hubbard called them, on release from the volcanoes attach themselves to human beings. Here's one of them on the cover of one of his many books.
Scientologists who are doing OT levels come to believe that they're inhabited by thousands of little alien spirits, extraterrestrial spirits, and they're basically seeking to exorcise these spirits which are governing their behaviour and reactions.
Meanwhile, the Sea Organisation are determined to find out everything they can about Ali. She has to answer some very personal questions.
I had to list all of my sexual partners, everything I did with them, how many times, very, very detailed information. And I queried that because I was quite upset about that, and they said it was there to help me.
Scientology keeps records on everything its recruits reveal. This information has been used to silence former members.
I've yet to meet anybody who hasn't done something embarrassing in their life. And Scientology will inevitably find out about it. Anything that hasn't been found out, or anything sexual that you've done that could be considered reprehensible, So the organisation does have a tremendous power over former members.
When inside Saint Hill, Ali saw a document about Scientology's chief critic John Atack. She put the document in her bag to read in the privacy of the toilet, meaning to put it back later. But unknown to Ali, the Scientologists were secretly filming her, secretly filming them. They called the police.
When I was arrested, it happened very suddenly. I found myself being taken out of the castle by the police, and all of a sudden all sorts of Sea Org members I'd never seen before, older ones who were quite scary looking, quite sinister, came out of the woodwork, and 3 or 4 of them were taking photographs or video footage of me. It was bizarre. Everyone was lining the corridors as I was walking out, looking at me, and as soon as I gave them eye contact, they'd look away from me like I was evil or something. It was an amazing experience.
We wanted representatives of Scientology to appear in this programme, but conditions for an interview could not be agreed. Scientology does not approve of open discussion of its beliefs. It calls journalists suppressive people and believes them to be irredeemably evil. Ron Hubbard devised a special policy to deal with these perceived enemies of Scientology. It allows them to do anything to deter, discredit or destroy their critics. Journalist Russell Miller faced months of harassment as his biography of Hubbard neared publication.
Firstly, they kept informing the police that I was responsible for various crimes, and so the police would show up at my doorstep, want to know where I was on such and such a day. The first crime was the murder of someone in a pub in South London, and they had solid evidence that I was responsible for that, or so they thought.
After fighting countless lawsuits against Scientology, leading critic John Atack went bankrupt in May. He's been harassed by them since 1983.
I've been followed by private detectives. Private detectives have sought to interrogate my family, my wife's family. If you just write down a list of the worst possible things you can say about somebody, I've been accused of those things. Not just in whispering campaigns, but in print.
Scientology vigorously defends its freedom of belief, saying it improves life in a troubled world. But evidence is accumulating that it's one of the most destructive cults.
Scientologists who have come out of their group have reported some of the highest instances of suicidal and self-destructive tendencies afterwards. And many of them have told us that when they were in the group, they were warned that if they left Scientology, they would commit suicide within 6 months. Many of them left with enormous fear.
John Buchanan was a Scottish landscape gardener who worked in Germany. 3 years ago, John became involved in Scientology at the Munich mission. He piled up huge debts with several German banks to buy Scientology courses and materials. Last November, to escape his debts, he committed suicide. He left a final note for his mother, Mary MacDonald. He explained that he believed that he would come back to life and return to Scotland. For Scientology had taught John Buchanan to believe in reincarnation.
It definitely said that he was going to be reincarnated and come back in another life or another form, which obviously something that he was never brought up to believe in, and I just didn't know that he did believe in things like that.
John Buchanan did return to Scotland, to be buried in this village churchyard in the Trossachs. When he died, among his few possessions were the Scientology books, tapes and equipment that had cost him thousands of pounds.
I feel that if it wasn't for Scientology, he'd probably still be here.